Alright, hello and welcome to Podcast for the Politically Homeless. This is the first episode in what I hope will evolve into a much longer series, so I just wanted to set the scene a wee bit for first-time viewers. First off, I'm no political expert, I'm not a journalist or some media type, I've never done a podcast show before, so if this is a bit rough around the edges, well, that's just how it is. I started this because, to be honest, I don't feel like I fit in anywhere politically anymore. It doesn't matter if it's left, right or whatever, it all just feels a bit broken, to be honest. So this podcast is for folk who feel the same, people who are maybe a bit disillusioned, maybe confused, or maybe just tired of being told what to think in general. I'm not here to push any specific agenda, I just want to have honest, open, respectful conversations about the world that we're living in and how it affects all of us. Trying to cut through the noise a bit, ask questions, share thoughts, and if we're lucky, maybe even have a laugh along the way. If that sounds like something you're into, well, you're more than welcome here. This is the podcast for the politically homeless, and let's see where it takes us. Okay, hello and welcome to Podcast for the Politically Homeless. This show is a safe space for discussions around all things, politics included, but also around science, technology and general issues that face society. I'm Thren.
I'm Zeph, and today we're exploring the topic of becoming androids. As humans progress towards medical advancements with brain-machine interfacing and the like, we're going to discuss today what that might imply for humans.
Yeah, there's definitely lots to discuss there. I suppose you and me both have been following this for quite some time, and obviously in the last 5 years, I think the progress has been fairly exponential in so many areas of how technology is interacting with medical care and I suppose medical enhancement and medical solutions to problems. But I suppose, like everything else when it comes to technology, for all the good that it may bring, it's inevitably going to bring some potential risks and hazards with that. So what's your kind of general overarching thought on this?
So I think initially we've seen the likes of, and I know that you and I both talk about Neuralink as being a predominant brain-machine interface. I think patient number one from Neuralink described it as like having a built-in aimbot when he plays video games. And he said himself that with enough time that we would need different leagues for advanced players versus non-enhanced players. That in of itself is kind of great. Imagine, like, as somebody that plays video games, I could only imagine having a built-in aimbot and just how much of a cheat that would feel like.
Absolutely. Because again, it's and that's the whole aim of a lot of these technologies. And I suppose that's where, when it comes to the risks and benefits, I suppose that's where you have to make a bit of a split, because technology enhanced, like for instance, I seen a documentary on Good Morning Britain, I think it was, a couple of weeks ago about this young lass. I forget her name, but she's quite popular on TikTok and YouTube, but she's got bionic arms. Her arms were amputated when she was very young, and she's now got these fully robotic prosthetic arms that are more or less, I think they're partially AI driven, but they're also just it senses her kind of thought patterns and kind of minor muscle movements, and it's so advanced. But I suppose when you're talking about a limb like an arm or a bionic leg or something else, well, that device going wrong in some way has very little risk associated with it, really, other than the direct physical, I suppose, pitfalls of your artificial leg or arm, not doing what it's supposed to. But when it comes to a brain-machine interface like Neuralink, that just opens up a whole new territory and a whole, like, if you think about, like, I'm thinking back to movies. I like to tie things together with movies, and if you look back, like some of the Black Mirror episodes and some of the films where it's about, again, your whole identity and your whole existence is made available through digital technology that you're not in control of, but it's all effectively wired directly to your brain. You think about things about your mobile phone being compromised at the moment. Imagine your brain-machine interface could be compromised, and yeah, that's a scary prospect.
And I think I have to agree, when we were looking at notes before the show, we both came to the agreement of loss of human essence, like how much of it is a machine and how much of it is you, it's like you say, as an example of replacing a hand, how many parts would you need to replace? I think people on the internet quite susceptible to following Elon Musk. He himself has said Optimus parts in the future could theoretically be swapped out for human limbs. And then I guess it becomes about at what point is there that divide, that loss of human essence, the thing that makes us, and at what point does that thing become a robot? Like as you're saying, there's some amazing uses right now. Nolan is a prime example of that. Neuralink patient number one.
Yeah.
Definitely feels like he's got some kind of himself back.
Yeah.
But how much do you give in exchange for that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I suppose the difference when it's prosthetic limbs like arms and legs, and other fully prosthetic artificial limbs, then again that has been fully swapped out. But that's it's an appendage to your body. When it comes to your brain, I suppose the difference in Neuralink is it's an interface rather than a replacement. No part of your brain is being replaced. I suppose the part that is being jumped over in a sense is the connection to your other senses, your other outputs, but purely from a digital sense. So it allows a capability to connect with digital equipment that we never had previously. It doesn't replace our ability to see the natural world around us with our own two eyes, but it does allow us to potentially see things in a digital space in a way that we never could before through this brain-machine interface. So I suppose there's an element of our underlying humanity that's protected in that sense because it's not replacing those things. But the whole thing is to give us a faster interface, and I understand the thing around Neuralink, and again, we could probably talk for hours about Neuralink, but we'll keep it in relation to the health benefits for this discussion. But Neuralink in general has got so many applications that potentially benefit, and I know they're early stage at the moment, but again, the idea longer term is to be able to repair broken spines and literally give people the ability to walk again that they never had before, repair an eyesight and all kinds of things. Again, the possibilities are endless.
And at the cost of a reduced transplant waiting list as well. Because right now, as you say, things like Neuralink and there is a vast available of brain-machine interfaces on the horizon, just like Neuralink. The ability to control robotic limbs, to be able to give these restored function to otherwise paraplegic people, quadriplegic people, is reducing waiting lists. That's not just the Neuralink. We've also got things like organs being printed aboard the ISS in trials at present because of the microgravity environment allows a more jelly-like texture to be printed without losing its structural integrity. These robotic limbs, like hands, like eyeballs to a degree. There's companies working on digital eyeballs. These will reduce sometimes lengthy and exhausting, but in a lot of modern worlds, quite pricey transplant lists where it is dependent on how much money do you have available to get that transplant above somebody that has less of a financial availability. And I think, as we transition towards cyborg future, like our androidy cyborgy selves, may be thankful as some of those reduced costs and reduced waiting times on fixing problems like, damaged or broken limbs.
Yeah, and like I say, that's just one aspect. There's a whole load of epilepsy, for instance. I believe that they think that there's potentially a chance that they could cure epilepsy through the Neuralink device. Obviously, there's the whole thing about being able to bridge a broken spine, which is just phenomenal if that is eventually achievable. But then I suppose it starts to tap into something that yeah, I've been interested in for a long time, and I know it's been debunked here and there and talked about at length. But it's like how much of our brain we actually use, and again, if Neuralink can help unlock some of that capability to actually not just interface with digital technology in a faster way by increasing our input output bandwidth, but also being able to potentially kind of kickstart or rediscover parts of our brain that we don't use to the capacity that we potentially could use them. I'm not saying we don't use them at all, because I think that's where some of the debunking came in, because it was commonly believed that we only use X% of our brains, and then I think over the last kind of 10 years or so that's slowly been disproven that actually we use a lot more of our brains than we think. We just don't use them to full capacity, and I think that's something else Neuralink could probably help unlock.
I think on the more focused subject of brain-machine interfacing, as we become more dependent on these kinds of tools, we do put ourselves more at risk for hacking or data control elements. And I think, like, you mentioned mobile phones a few moments ago. It's a similar thing where right now, if your mobile phone was hacked, you'd feel quite vulnerable. But, it's not everything. If we are putting computers in our brains, what's to say that some bad actor isn't going to access everything, all your childhood memories, your banking PIN numbers, your, intimate moments, or any of the other just little bits you've carried through your life?
It's not even just bad actors, though. Again, when you think about once you've got that kind of connection into your brain, and again, just to like shift the conversation briefly to politics, but not too heavily. But again, we mentioned the other day when we were talking about the fact that privacy, the first discussion we had was about the Online Privacy Act, and I'd mentioned during that discussion that if I ever went to a country and they demanded that I hand over my mobile phone and all its passwords before entering that country, I'd just say, deport me again. I'll go home. I don't want to come to this country. Now imagine that's a brain-machine interface that they're talking about. We need to see all your thoughts, all your recent memories. And again, this is where I come back to that Black Mirror episode. I seen a Black Mirror.
Check the last 24 hours of activity of your life to make sure you can safely travel and stuff.
He was coming in. I've not seen the whole episode, but I've seen the trailer for it. And basically, the guy was coming in the door to this secure building, and he handed over his ID as normal. But then he also had to like scroll back the last 24 hours of his life, basically, and upload it, and then upload something from the last 2 weeks, and then they ran a quick scan, and then away you go. And again, that's once you've got the technology, the capability to interface with inside somebody's head. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, that technology can be used in all sorts of good and bad ways. And this is what I mean about the brain-machine interface. Whilst it's got the most fundamental benefits associated with it, it's also got so many risks associated as well. Whereas again, prosthetic limbs...
I was just going to say, how many people do you think would go for an ad-supported brain-machine interface if it meant it was their only affordable entry point?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's like you're in Ready Player One like scenarios there. When they've got these, what were they called? They had to go into these. They had to work off their debts by going into these rooms where they had to, something like that. And again, because they were slaves to the system, basically, and again, it's the same thing. Yeah, you want this capability, we'll do it, but you pretty much become, you've sold a bit of your soul to get the privilege of using it, basically.
You wake up in the middle of the night craving a Coca-Cola for no good reason, or... Sorry, I shouldn't say Coca-Cola if this is...
There are other brands of cola available, by the way.
There are other brands of cola available. All the same could be true of any particular luxury item, such as
Pepsi.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a fizzy drink, right? It could be, you've got the ad-supported tier. We've seen it even from premium devices. I saw yesterday an audio interface that's $900 to buy and comes with a $50 a month subscription. It's premium tier, or a $10 a month subscription at its lowest tier. I could very much see a world where everybody can access a brain-machine interface, but it would be at a different tier, much like we're seeing with social media platforms such as X, where Freemium users can enjoy some benefits and do have limited use to the tool, but you are going to be otherwise faced with an ad apocalypse unless you go premium and unlock that extra usability that we're otherwise holding behind a paywall.
Yeah, it'll be like dentists. You know what I mean? If you've got like good play dentist, you can get this, that, and that. If you're on NHS dentist, again, you can get this, and that's it. That's your only option, the most basic option, and no frills. And again, yeah, brain machine interface services will probably be the same. Upgrades available that are costly but give you enhanced usability, etc. And yeah, there'll end up being a pay scale associated with these things where some people benefit more than others. And this is my concern in general. We were talking the other day about the fact that, again, the healthcare system in the US is so heavily monetized around everything. And again, something like a Neuralink device, again, if it's not I suppose turned over to for the pure purpose of its medical benefits, and instead is seen as a cash cow where we can really benefit, financially by capitalising financially off the sale of this device and its services, rather than actually allowing it to benefit people for the good it can do.
The same is true for wider medical devices, right? Like we've seen. Like with everything that humanity advances towards, initially there's a wealth divide, and certain items still stay partially wealth divided, right? Like, say, for example, air travel. Whilst the cost of air travel has come down, it's not come down to an affordable price point where most of the population could afford to go on an aeroplane once a year. Whilst there is affordable holidays, there's not necessarily an affordable scale of holiday. Much like another technology that's less so, the automobile, is so widely adopted, so cheaply available that almost anybody can enter the market of an automobile. And it kind of leaves you thinking, if we are getting replacement Optimus arms and we are getting replacement Optimus legs, or we've got a brain machine interface, or AI powered hands, is that going to be something that's only available to a limited few that do have money? Or like how do we progress forward to make it so that it is open, fair, and like includes everybody as we step into this next era of advanced technologies?
So are you foreseeing a brain machine interface or bionic arm equivalent of the Mobility Finance Scheme?
I mean, not necessarily the Mobility Finance Scheme.
Because it would be a similar thing. Again, there would need to be something like that, to make sure that these technologies, no matter how expensive they end up being, that people can buy them when they have a medical need to have them. It's the same with so many of these devices. They end up behind the paywall, and only the people that can afford them benefit from what they have to offer. When that's not just a luxury shift in benefit, but an actual fundamental quality of life benefit, then again, there needs to be some kind of scheme in place. The Mobility Finance Scheme is making sure that disabled people can obviously get access to a good, reliable car because they absolutely need it to get around. It's public transport's not always that easy.
I guess a similar thing is the government phones in America. I don't know if you're aware of the program where the government gave out phones to breadline families. They weren't the best of phones by no means, but what it did is it unlocked internet access and cellular communication for an otherwise minority of people that couldn't afford it. It very much has to be a similar thing. We've seen the price point of mobile phones and computers come down dramatically as the technology evolved. Much like in the late 80s, early 90s, a computer that could send emails and that could do graphical work especially would have been thousands and thousands of pounds, and now in almost every home there's a young teenage boy playing advanced video games on something that even the likes of NASA or the NSA would have only dreamed of having access to in the late 80s and early 90s at an otherwise affordable price point. And I think, regardless of the technology, if it's something as big as cyborg human replacements, especially something like a brain machine interface where it would unlock almost like an additional tier of human, it would be like a technological upgrade to the human genome, right? Like it would give us more as an apex predator than we already have, which is significant considering other animals on the planet. And I think we just need to make sure that everybody keeps up at the same pace, and we don't just create a subclass of non digitally enhanced humans.
But again, I mean, I suppose if you think about it, whilst technology is changing, the problem that you're describing there isn't necessarily a new one, because I suppose people's opportunities in life and how far they can progress often is dependent on how good an education they can get, and sometimes the best education isn't a free education, and it's the same thing. Again, Neuralink device, in some forms and some application, there'll be an aspect of the Neuralink device that helps enhance knowledge and learning and all kinds of things like that as well. So again, for those reasons, again, you don't want it to be unevenly distributed across the people that would need it and benefit from it.
Almost think about like the Matrix downloading a Kung Fu pack, and that in recent years becomes more evident that could be a future that we're heading towards, where robotics companies train one robot agent and deploy that training on another agent.
And then a million robots know the same thing straight away, and they can do it because they've all been trained the same. Obviously, that's how the whole Tesla self-driving thing is progressing through. Was it the Dojo system that they had for training the AI, and then again, every car just knows it with the next update. But I was just going to say something there, because you made me think about the counter-argument to that. Because whilst we might sit and, I suppose, be concerned about the even distribution of Neuralink devices made available to everybody, now, if you wholeheartedly answered that question in relation to will dispel any concerns about that, then I suppose the alternate answer is everybody gets one, and it's mandatory. Everybody gets a Neuralink device fitted, at birth, for instance. But if you looked at that, a society that was going to do that, implement that kind of we're going to fit you with a brain machine interface at birth. It doesn't. That's what I'm saying. It's again, so where do you land with that? I mean, I suppose it would have to be something that is an opt-in device made available to everybody that wants one.
Mobile phones, I guess, is the only thing we can compare to right now. It's almost like a shift in what we can understand when we bring about brain-machine interfacing. I guess the closest comparison initially would be like a mobile phone, where it is like an opt-in, or like, imagine if mobile phone was combined with LASIK surgery, and it was like, for a few £1,000 you can opt in to have this thing that removes the need to have a mobile phone in your hand. Now, admittedly, not everybody's going to buy in at a few £1,000, a few $1,000, etc. Sorry, very clearly, even with a modified voice, British. And then I guess maybe transitionally over time, because you have to think on such a grand scale than like just the immediate. I think over enough time that it would become almost, as you say, like a mandatory requirement, or something that people would be like, yes, I will have this installed in the baby now at birth, than at a later point.
The longer term implications, like I mentioned about education, if it gets to a point that it's like, everybody can benefit from this technology, so we want to make sure everybody gets, so the whole method of educating people shifts towards implanting information through a brain-machine interface, so it becomes mandatory to have one. Otherwise, you're almost falling behind. And it's interesting, because you mentioned right at the start of the discussion about the different leagues for sports. Again, you're either physically enhanced through technology or you're not. So you kind of create a different sport. Again, it might be the same in relation to society as a whole.
This is very much a controversial podcast, right? You could almost make the comparison in that scenario to racial segregation, where you'd be saying, okay, now we've got enhanced people schools and non-enhanced people schools, where if
Yeah,
you've
that's
got
what I mean.
brain-machine interface, you're going through school in 2 years, and it's just like come in for an hour each day and install packs, versus somebody maybe going through the conventional education system as a non-enhanced person. And you can very much tie that round to, like I say, the idea of racial segregation. That didn't end well, so it definitely needs to be carefully managed. But I think the same is true of a mobile phone, right? And that's why I make the comparison now. The vast amount of information you can have in your hand, like the amount of okay, you and I both grew up at a time where if you heard a really cool song, you had to remember the name of that song until you got home and it played on the radio next to make a copy. Whereas now, if you don't even know the name of a song, you can just hold this magical little box in your hand up to the noise and it knows the song. Like, we're very much already there. I think early brain-machine interfaces will be like an additional extra to what we currently use mobile phones for.
You'll have people in 50 years' time, the way we say, when I was a kid, if I wanted to learn a new thing, I had to go to a building called a library and get a book and absorb new information. Whereas now you pick up your mobile phone, and you can imagine kids in like 50 years' time, like hearing from their parents, you just sat there and like your eyeballs went up and to the left, and you just learned Japanese. Through your brain machine interface. When I was a kid, I had to pick my phone up and actually Google a website and sit and learn all, and again, those same comparisons will be made about how difficult life was for us without this technology over now you've got it, you couldn't live without it.
Computing lessons, my nan always told me she spent 2 months training to be a typewriter operator. And you see, even that giggle now, it's like just less than 100 years later, the idea of someone even going closer to that level of training for advanced pieces of machines like a computer or a mobile phone seem absurd. And it's exactly as you say, that comparison where you or I now in 2025 would need to spend a significant amount of time learning Japanese versus somebody with an efficiently running brain machine interface in less than a century's time. Because this is the crazy thing. The current predictions, and mark this date if this does get released as a release show podcast, mark this date and come watch it back in 25 years and tell me I was wrong. But I'd say within the next 25 years we will see commercially available brain machine interfaces that are advancing maybe the elites initially, and hopefully that trickles down.
That'll trickle down theory again. It never quite works, does it?
We hope it trickles down. I mean, it has to trickle down, right? If it's such an evolutionary change for humans to remove this device from our hands and put it on board, that even if the elites did want to keep it for themselves, we've seen in every known example of dystopian films where this is the case, the lower class of humans that are without it find ways to engineer and create their own solutions reminiscent to that the elites have. And I mean, it's much like crypto coins, right? Because right now, as of recording this could be immortalized on the internet. Somebody could be watching or listening to this show if it goes live on a brain machine interface in the future, right? That is the brilliance of immortalizing a show. And in 2025, now, it feels like such a dystopian nightmare that it's funny we're talking about the idea of brain machine interfacing. Because I think back to the Aldous Huxley book, Brave New World, And there it's not necessarily to the degree of brain-machine interfacing. It's done with a fictional drug called Soma, but it's a tool to make people compliant in an otherwise dystopian future. And the sect of people that are against the idea of taking Soma and engineered DNA, etc., are otherwise treated like primitive species of man throughout the novel. And I can definitely see we've got sects of people that are, the anti-vaxxers, the truthers, the QAnon movement, that would definitely oppose brain-machine interfaces, that would go the way of the dinosaur, that would go the way of the typewriting old lady that thought computers were fad, or those people that thought they'll stick to the horse because Henry Ford wanted to conspire
But
to steal money from them for gas or for whatever number of reasons.
I mean, I don't have any data on this, so this is purely anecdotal. But I'm going to guess that if you look at the time lag between a new technology arriving, like a fundamentally new technology that really requires an absolute kind of change of behaviours, to adopt it and to move away from the legacy, between that arriving and being fully adopted, like achieving over 90% saturation, and pretty much everybody's doing this now, you're talking a generational gap for most things. Landline telephones, or things like using cash over cards and apps, do you know what I mean? All these kind of things are fundamental to what we know. And when you've grown up with something, technology might move along to a degree, but if you're not forced to move along with it, you could decide to be stuck in your ways and not move on. But generationally, you find that when kids grow up with the technology, and they have no need to be wary of it or to shun that technology, they'll just embrace it and run with it. So you'll always find within a new generation will help carry forward the full embracing of new technologies.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really great place to end the show. That's it. Young people will get a brain-machine interface, whether that's today's young people or the young people of 3 generations from now. You're correct in saying, how many people doubted the mobile phone as an example? How many people were like, no thank you, I'll stick to my landline, don't need a mobile phone. They all vast became elderly people dependent on an otherwise aging landline network. The younger children of today, they have no idea what landline is. They have no concept of dial-up internet. They've grown up in the era of 5G. There's still 5G naysayers our age.
That's it. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. It's too late in the show. But yeah, you're absolutely right on that point. Again, and the thing they don't have is the trepidation of new technology. Again, they don't have that fear that keeps a lot of people away from using it. As we're growing up in this age of AI, technology and robotics, everybody's fearful that AI or robotics is coming to steal their job, rather than embracing those technologies as tools and helping yourself progress. Whereas generations that are growing up with that technology available to them will just pick it up and use it because it's there and it's available, and they don't have the fear of that technology. So yeah, I suppose if we're going to sum up on anything, it's like children of the future, and that's pretty much about it, I suppose.
Children of the future, folks. That is the end of the show. That's it. Cut it right there. Mr. Producer, Mr. Editor, whoever it is that's doing post, that is the keynote closing word of the show. We're done at that point. Children of the future. Exactly that.